right. We hope everyone has been doing well and is staying safe. And for all of you in the States, we hope that you get to enjoy the holidays and spend time with your families. For the final TezTalks Radio episode we will be doing this year, we're going to kind of talk about all the exciting developments and accomplishments we witnessed all throughout the year within the Tezos ecosystem. We actually have Vishakh of Cryptonomic joining us back today too. So how's everything going, Vishakh?
Things are going good. It's all winding down at the end of the year. It's great to be back with you guys. It's been a really intense year, both positive and negative senses. So it's good to kind of take stock of the situation with you guys.
Yeah, I just can't believe that we're already at the end of the year. This year, it just really seemed like it went by so quickly. And just thinking back to a few months ago, it was just, I don't know about you guys, I felt like it was a constant sense of impending doom. I didn't know if I was still going to be alive next week or what was going to happen. And I don't know, things seem to be turning around, at least from what we can see on the news. I don't know how much of that we can trust, but they're saying the vaccine is coming. Actually, some people already have gotten it. I hope this will be the end of COVID. I really do.
We can only hope. Yeah, as for the news, I really haven't been tuning into that myself.
Well, the nice thing is, in spite of all this churn and all this chaos, so many people have been building so much this year.
Yeah.
And it's a bit counterintuitive or it's paradoxical, really, because there's been so many lockdowns, because people have been forced to kind of stay in more. It's focused people a bit more on work, and that's why I think there's been so much that's coming out this year. Obviously, it's good to have balance, and I hope that everybody gets to rest a little bit right now, and in the coming year, everyone sees their friends, family, travels all around the world. But one of the effects of all of this negativity has been that people have been able to put their heads down and just keep churning away, in this radical new domain.
Yeah, I think that's the silver lining. Is that the term that they use, where something bad kind of happens, but you try to extract the good out of that? And I mean, I saw that in my own stuff as well, not really just crypto stuff, but there were days, where I would normally go outside and do something, but it's oh, can't do that. What else am I going to do? So just going to stay home and get some work done.
Yeah, pretty much. I've had to tell my team members, take it a little bit easy. Sometimes I log in on Mondays and I see this chat has already scrolled pages and pages, and there's all this email. I'm like, look, everybody's got to take it a little bit easy because
you're going to burn yourself out.
Yeah.
So for today, we're going to kind of focus around a few areas. We're going to basically look at adoption, developer relations, and some of the progress we've witnessed within DeFi. But kind of before we get into that, Vishakh, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, in case some people are unfamiliar, and talk about what Cryptonomic has been up to since our last Test Talk.
Sure. So I'll give you a shorter bio this time because there's the other episode. But I've been at Cryptonomic the last 3 years. The company is indeed 3 years old. Previously, I worked in the financial industry. Before that, I did machine learning in grad school. And for the past 2.5 years, we've been working really hard on the Tezos platform. We've been building developer tools. We have the Gallium wallet, and we have some other user tools as well. So Cryptonomic's been around in the Tezos ecosystem since day zero, pretty much. So we're really excited about where the Tezos ecosystem is going. The last time I was on this podcast, we were just in this mad dash hurry, right? We had all these projects that were coming to fruition. We're just launching them one by one. And I said last time we need to kind of sit down, take stock, when you launch a lot of things, you just have to sit back and you have to do a bunch of cleanup, get rid of technical debt, documentation. One thing that we're really excited about is we just underwent a full-on audit by Trail of Bits for the Galleon wallet and the Config.js library. So we're going to be working on the remediation. We'll have, obviously, the report public soon. But that gives us comfort because having such a major audit on a wallet that's so widely used, that's really nice. So we've been doing a lot of consolidation and cleanup. But at the same time, we've been collaborating with Kevin Merabi and Tezos Stable Tech. You might have seen yesterday that he launched ETHTZ, which is essentially wrapped Ethereum on the Tezos blockchain.
Right.
We're also building a sort of atomic swap-based exchange in order to allow these new tokens to be fungible between the Tezos and Ethereum blockchain. So that's something that's about to come up. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on. We're also excited about 2 projects that we're doing with elevated returns. They'll be announced soon, so I'm not going to get too much into it. But there's a lot of mad dash scramble again to get all of this done before Christmas or the end of the year holiday break. So plenty going on. So half of what we're doing is consolidation. The other half is just trying to clean up these client projects. And then finally, we do stuff outside of the Tezos space as well. So we had a couple of corporate engagements recently that went really well. So we cite a few sighs of relief, and now we're just looking forward to getting hammered on eggnog and just lying back in the couches.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I would agree with you, crunch time, for sure, as we're starting to approach the holidays and wrap up this year. But I think one thing that you discussed when we had you back on in August was the Chainlink and Oracle integration. Has there been any updates on that?
Yeah, so we did all the initial work in order to get Chainlink Oracles working. And indeed, after the last conversation we had, there was a Chainlink hackathon. People built a few prototype applications. The missing ingredient has been, because all systems are ready to go, the missing piece is for Chainlink to do an actual deployment on the Tezos blockchain. And as it happened, I think last week, our friends at SmartBuy or Smart Chain Arena, who are doing the other half of the Chainlink integration, they, I believe, received a grant from Chainlink to do some final touches.
Interesting.
So expect some news in the new year along those lines.
Yeah. I think like Will said, we're going to be talking about adoption, developer relations, and decentralized finance. Let's go ahead and just talk about some of the adoption that happened in 2020. And for me, 2020 was really the first year where I started to have the feeling that people were taking blockchain more seriously. Like when I say people, I mean people outside of the blockchain space as well, of course. People like you, me, and Will, we take it very, very seriously. Just we work on it every single day. But just seeing, I think, the recognition from the governments, from large enterprises in 2020 has been really positive for the outlook going into the coming year. So one of the biggest things that we saw on Tezos specifically was the focus on STOs. So over $4 billion worth of STOs are to be conducted on Tezos. And so, Vishakh, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on why security token issuers are flocking to this blockchain versus other blockchains like Ethereum and also these other blockchains that offer STOs?
Yeah, when you talk about security, the security tokens, so far in the blockchain world, we've just been happy to represent some tokens on a blockchain and just be able to trade them, right? But in real life, securities are actually pretty complex.
Yeah.
The life cycle of a security is a really, really intricate thing. One of the interesting things I saw was EquiSafe. They're modeling the entire life cycle of a token, and although they have a lightweight version of everything they're doing, their heavyweight version is quite involved. So when you have so many missing pieces, and you have this absolute need for certainty and accuracy, a blockchain like Tezos, where you are able to kind of have use more sturdier functional programming techniques and do some formal verification, that can really be a difference maker. Because a lot of this stuff, if you do it full on, right, and not just kind of do a toy example and declare mission accomplished, if you go all the way, it's actually really, really involved. And I'll draw a parallel. Dexter is very similar to existing exchanges on Ethereum, but we saw that the Nomadic team were able to collaborate with the Dexter team and do a little bit of verification and add this robustness that gives extra peace of mind. So if you have a security token and you're putting it on an exchange or putting it on infrastructure that's more robust, exhibited to be more robust, then truly you can say that it's ready for prime time.
And on a more general level, when it comes to adoption, I really feel like, I guess, to draw an analogy to maybe building a house or something, where before you actually build the house, you could kind of need like the blueprints and you need to get the materials. I feel like 2020 was all about like building out those materials, and now we're finally in a place where it's like, oh, finally we can actually start to build the house. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting going into 2021. Can you give your general outlook as to kind of where we are right now in terms of no adoption to mainstream adoption? Do you think we're almost halfway, less than halfway? What are your thoughts on that?
Overall, as a sort of technical person in this space, I feel equipped. And that's a big difference from last year. Last year, I didn't feel equipped.
Yeah.
So, and that analogy about building a house, it's so true, because the first year that Tezos was live, we were laying down the absolute foundation, just showing that a proof of stake network can work, governance can work, you can do a protocol upgrade. We saw all of that work. Then there was, like this big vacuum around tooling and standards. People started building all these kinds of tools. But the real maturity that I see this year is coordination, right? Like, there's a technical problem to solve, but there's also, for maturity, there's a social problem, right? Like, you need to show mature and progressive coordination. So if you look at some of the newer standards that have come out, the TZIP repository has a bunch of sort of draft or close to final proposals. The FA2 standard, that looks really, really promising. And the nice thing about it, it's not just a standard, right? Like, lots of blockchains have lots of standards, but there's a whole sort of ecosystem of people actively collaborating on it. If you look at the discussion, this is all public and transparent, right? Like, you go there, you look at the comments, there are people who are building tools, people who are looking at it more from a sort of application point of view, that are having a back and forth conversation. So this coordination, right, where you have like this sort of brain trust, people who are really good at building blockchains, people who are really good at building applications, they're all getting together and pushing out metadata standards, FA2 standards. The tooling was already being built, and now we had a few exemplar use cases. I think Dexter was also like a watershed, right? We saw something that works, that's been vetted. Like, it takes the best aspects of Tezos and it kind of rolled it out, and now you have that plug and play ability, right? Like, you want to launch a new token, well, the infrastructure is ready for you. So whether you're a builder, whether you're looking at it more from a business point of view, institutional point of view, you should feel equipped.
Yeah, I think the word equipped is actually really good, especially for new devs who are coming into the space who might not be as fundamentally excited about the technology as you or me might be, right? We can't expect everyone to be super pumped about blockchain. Maybe they want to come in and explore how to use blockchain. And if you didn't have those infrastructure kind of things in place, they're not going to stick around to wait for you to equip them with the tools. So I think it's really exciting that not only Tezos, I think like a few other chains have come into a place where we're ready to equip people with the tools that they need to build. And before I pass this over to Will for him to bring up a few topics too, I want to get your thoughts on some of the U.S. government regulation that has occurred recently. I was just on Twitter this morning, and there was some additional talk about, I think Brian Armstrong brought this up a few weeks ago, about some rumors where the government would be imposing some kind of regulation where you can only essentially withdraw, I think the word was like hosted wallets, where
it had to do with
yeah.
the Stable Act, right?
Yeah. And where they kind of want you to stay within the walled garden of sorts, where you can only withdraw to this. You know, if you want to withdraw to a wallet that you hold custody yourself, then maybe that's in some sort of strange place that's not really covered by the law. I haven't looked into it so much, but just the idea where it's both good and bad, right? It's good in the sense that the governments are finally taking this for what we saw all along. You know, it's actually real. We think it can actually have a big impact on the economics of the world. So now they feel like they have to do something to protect the citizens or retain control or whatever. But at the same time, it kind of completely goes against the idea of blockchain and crypto. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's a double-edged sword. One thing that I don't think a lot of people still appreciate is how hard the interface is between the sort of regulated part of the blockchain infrastructure and the unregulated part. So, I mean, as with everyone else, as with all the other early adopters of cryptocurrencies and blockchains, you know, I like my freedom. I don't want anyone to tell me what I can or cannot do with my keys, my wallets. But a lot of people who try to materially use these technologies, you know, in regulated domains, they all have the same problem, like the money trail, right? Like whether you're moving funds between an exchange and a private wallet, the money trail can get quite complicated. And whenever you interface with the government, right, whenever you're trying to show that your funds for some purpose are legit, you need to kind of go back like 5, 6, 7 steps and show like this whole chain of legitimacy. And because there were no regulations, none of the exchanges, none of the service providers were really equipped or were really even incentivized to allow you to sort of voluntarily allow these sort of identifiers that will let you establish a money trail. So let's say you were mining Bitcoin in 2013, you mined a bunch of Bitcoin, then you moved it in and out of exchanges, and now you're trying to buy a house.
Yeah.
You're going to have a hard time.
Yeah.
So with all these new people coming in, millions and millions of new people coming into the ecosystem, perhaps it'll be really helpful for them, right? People who will install PayPal, they're like, oh, Bitcoin's going up. I'll buy some Bitcoin, or hopefully soon Tezos, right?
Right.
But then like when they actually go to, you know, buy a house or rent a car, they have some trouble. So this might actually ameliorate their situation. So as long as it doesn't intrude fundamentally on, you know, like, for example, my ability to generate a key pair and use that to secure my funds and move that anywhere I want instantaneously around the world, I think it's okay. A little bit of regulation is not bad. Nothing draconian's come out yet. I can appreciate why Coinbase, when you're trying to withdraw from Coinbase, they might want you to KYC your private wallet. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's all a question of margins and of what extent. There's some really problematic aspects to the Stable Act, for example. But let's see how it pans out. I think overall I'm bullish because people are taking crypto seriously.
Yeah, I think the the Stable Act is very interesting because when it comes to stable coins in the crypto space, there's really two kinds, right? You have one kind like USDC, where it's actually backed by USD 1-to-1. So in that case, the Stable Act, which essentially is saying that the issuers of the stable coins have to apply for, I think, called a bank charter or something, and secure some approval before they can actually release those coins into the wild. I think that makes sense for something like USDC, which is clearly in line with the law. I mean, it's one of the only stable coins that Coinbase supports. But on the other side, you have these stable coins whose values actually aren't necessarily pegged 1-to-1 with USD. So in that case, I don't even know who the issuer actually is. So it's going to be interesting to see how the government kind of distinguishes how to regulate these very two different ways of issuing the stable coins.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a difference, right? Like when Checker, for example, is out, I think that's something that that Arthur is working on. Then you're going to have a whole like litany of stablecoins. But there's a difference between a stablecoin that tracks USD versus a stablecoin that's tracking, like, I don't know, the price of peaches, right?
Yeah.
So there's a difference there. But yeah, you know, it's a time of tumult. Anything can happen right now because of all this institutional money coming in.
Yeah.
But you know, overall, I would say this situation we're in still reminds me of the early web, and things change right once people start really coming in, and big companies start taking it seriously. But on the whole, you know, even though the internet could be seen as, at that time, was seen as threatening towards, you know, the nation state and governments, overall, the changes that happened were positive, and it really brought this technology everywhere. Of course, some things went a little bit astray. You have Facebook coming out with ads against Apple or whatnot in the people, but overall, this, you know, like the web becoming a big tent was actually good for everybody.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to bring something up on that same topic of regulation. I don't know if you all have seen this, but there's been a few Tezos bakers recently have concerns. It either may have to do with the Stable Act or it may be something else, but they have these concerns around perhaps potential regulations coming in, and it's preventing them from voting on protocol upgrades. Did you notice that at all, Vishakh?
So I haven't seen any first-hand accounts, but I'm aware that some bakers have long had concerns about, for example, money transmitter regulations. And this risk has always been there, right? That's why there are some blockchains out there that are trying to support smart contracts and scale, but still they're trying to stay on proof of work because they think proof of stake has some regulatory burden attached to it. So Zilliqa, for example, I think that was one of the arguments they were making when they were launching. But I mean, we would all like to see baking to be as decentralized as possible. We'd like small independent bakers to frictionlessly come on board and contribute to the ecosystem. And I'd be lying to you if I didn't have concerns about that. So we have to be really proactive about this, right? As a community, we can't shrink back from all this. Like, we have to be really mindful of what's going on, and we have to make our voice heard. And it's not just the U.S. government; it's like the Japanese government, the Singaporean government, everywhere. Like, people have to be advocates for essentially, like, you know, the free exchange of information and free exchange of well, I don't want to say currency, but a free exchange of economic virtual goods, right? And like, you know, it's a time of great flux. It reminds me, you know, World War I, right? When the Archduke got assassinated or whatever, that was a tinderbox moment. Anything could happen. It's like one of those inflection points in history. And this too is an inflection point, and I think we have to be really, really involved. Like we have to be educated. We have to understand what the Stable Act and stuff mean, especially when the new administration comes in and they start looking seriously at legislation in the United States. And then, where needed, we have to contribute our voice.
Yeah, so I think for some context, in case some people miss this, I believe what Will is referring to is, there's an upcoming proposal, and Coinbase, apparently their legal team has instructed them not to vote. And since they are a baker on the network, and one of the fundamental responsibilities of a baker is to participate in the voting process for these upgrades, it's not really like a conflict of interest, but it's sort of, you can't really fulfill all of your duties if you're playing within the confines of the existing laws and stuff. So I think like I think the fear for something like this is if like so many of these large entities come in and start baking, and they're unable to vote because their team has instructed them not to vote. It's sort of like what's going to happen that if so many of these bakers don't know how much of the voting power they actually control, but depending on how much they control, it could have a big impact on the network if they can't vote. So I think that's what Will was referring to when he was talking about the Coinbase thing.
Well, the good news is Tezos is upgradable, so the fundamental behavior of the protocol can be adapted to any new realities.
Yeah, so I think this is one of those things that we have to take into mind as we evolve into the future. Like what's the plan B if a lot of these bakers can't vote?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's kind of where the issue is. Going back off that, it's not a direct democracy per se. These entities like Coinbase, the users who, hold their XTZ on there, they don't have a say in the vote. So there's kind of some solutions that have been discussed, and I think one of them is to, actually give some of the stakeholders a say in the voting process. But it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that plays out for sure.
Yeah, and we should temper that with the awareness that the company apparently about to IPO has a different threat model than a typical baker.
That was shocking. I did not expect to hear Coinbase announce they wanted to go public.
Well, it is maybe a bull market. Who knows? So I guess it's a good place to do something like that.
So I guess we can circle back on to some other noteworthy developments we've seen throughout the year. Like Vishakh was talking about earlier, this year has definitely been the year of laying out the groundwork, so to speak, for these security token offerings and their actual usage beyond that, with some of these platforms like Dexter coming out. And we're definitely more well-equipped as well, as Vishakh brought up. But another interesting development has been around CBDCs. For those who are unaware, CBDCs are central bank digital currencies. And in September, I believe we learned about Societe Generale Forge using Tezos for future CBDC experiments. To me, this is pretty large, not just from the standpoint of how big Societe Generale is, but kind of the attention and legitimacy that it brings to Tezos. You don't see some of these other chains with maybe the exception of Ethereum. You don't see some of these other chains getting this level of attention and usage from entities of this caliber. What do you think, Vishakh?
Yeah, absolutely. Even though blockchain technology is still relatively new in large corporate circles, even then, some amount of due diligence is obviously done before a large bank will even take a stab at using a platform. And we work with some enterprise finance clients, and there is a certain threshold of diligence you have to pass in order to be taken seriously, right? There's most platforms will not even be considered or touched because the burden of proof is quite high. So that's definitely an encouraging sign. While it's true that we're still sort of in an experimental phase, it's not entirely clear where CBDCs are going, and the approach that a government, a nation state might take might be different from the approach that a private investment bank is taking. It's still immensely encouraging, right? And obviously, the momentum is still in the public discourse with Ethereum. So, in spite of that, such a large organization picking Tezos is a very encouraging sign. And one thing that might really result from this is, if they have a pleasant experience and this kind of comes out, then having such a big entity ratifying the platform, that's going to make Tezos easier to sell, even for less glamorous use cases. So far, and anytime we go to an enterprise client, they just want to talk about Bitcoin or Ethereum. Most of the time, whatever they want to do, they can't do on Bitcoin. So the project ends up being on Ethereum or some Ethereum compatible chain. But yeah, I mean, if you can, unfortunately, that's the way the world is, right? You can't just sit there and geek out. You have to put some logos on there. You have to say, well, this, that, and the other is using it. So, as a sort of consulting company, I think we're going to have an easier time now that something like this happened. But obviously, just like everyone else, we're waiting with bated breath on the individual details, which we'll doubtlessly come out at some point. But it's really helpful for for Tezos to be Nomadic is based in Paris. Tezos does have a sort of French flair, so I think that definitely helps. And I hope that means there's going to be some further interest, some further support from the French state or the state allied entities.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see where these CBDCs go. It's clear we're definitely moving towards a fully digitized world, if you will. Technology pretty much rules our day-to-day lives. And, the ways in which we connect, talk, and transact, amongst each other is beginning to change and certainly will change in the future. So I think it's kind of time for some of these entities to get ahead of the curve and, definitely start experimenting with blockchain.
Yeah, one thing naysayers are going to say is, well, sure, they like Tezos, but such a big company right now, they're only going to deploy their stuff onto a private instance of Tezos, or they're going to create a permission Tezos network. But for me, that's still a good thing, because there's still, I don't know whether this is the case, but even if they were to do that, that's still a really big endorsement of Tezos as a piece of technology, right?
Yeah.
And there are going to be all kinds of entities taking all kinds of different approaches, right? And perhaps it's possible that large banks, they take a more traditional approach, they have their own permission instance. But, there's a lot of blockchain native companies that are going to achieve tremendous scale. And they're going to be a lot more comfortable operating on a public ledger. And if they see that a more traditional company is who's highly, highly regulated is fine with the platform, then they're going to take it as an encouraging sign. So even for the naysayers, I think there's a little bit of a mitigation.
Yeah, that's definitely present for sure. I guess for another topic, something I've also noticed throughout the year is kind of this rise in some of these enterprises, not just experimenting with CBDCs, but also actually setting up banking operations. We saw Exion, which is a subsidiary of EDF Group, the French electricity giant, which has billions in annual revenue. So they're definitely not small by any means. And also Sword France, which is a part of a Sword Group, come out and start these baking operations. So I think it's definitely good to start to see more of this, more enterprises coming on. And, what better way to use Tezos than to actually use Tezos in the most direct form, which is, through securing the network as a baker.
Yeah, absolutely. And this the litany of use cases is far, far, far wider than we imagine. So I think you mentioned in a recent episode that Spruce is doing a lot of work with digital identity on Tezos, and then someone mentioned that Icon is doing this thing with digital ID in Korea. But identity, for example, has a huge upside potential for massive, massive corporations. And we've seen a lot of excitement with identity on the enterprise side. So it's almost like a package deal, right? Like in order to use these new technologies, use the potential of identity, for example, you have to hold some Tez at least. And if you're holding that Tez, you might as well start baking. And if you're holding the Tez and you're baking, you might as well be more participatory in the entire network. And even for larger companies, right? One of the things I've felt, one of the reasons why Cryptonomic is attracted to Tezos is as more and more of the serious infrastructure starts coming online, companies are going to have more skin in the game. Like large enterprises are going to have skin in the game with Tezos. On a normal chain, there could be hard forks, soft forks. You're putting these massive assets on there. You're putting these data feeds on there. You don't know if a chain's going to split, whether half the ecosystem is going to go here, half the ecosystem is going to go there. So this act of baking is actually pretty powerful for a lot of these large entities, right? If they're indeed coming on and they're participating, they're building identity systems and payment systems and stuff where Tezos is a linchpin, then they have a sort of vested interest in having a say in the evolution of the platform, right? Like it could be something as mundane as voting on a new constant, or it could be something like really, really political and dramatic, right? But the mere act of using Tezos and using it just to solve a technology problem, it just kind of gives you this incentive to participate, to bake, and to be present when all these governance deliberations are taking place.
Yeah, and I just have two thoughts on that, if you don't mind, Will.
Go ahead.
I think this ties in really well with what you were saying before, with all of the naysayers who are like, oh, they're just gonna go on like a private chain or something, or something like that. But there's like 2 points to be made there, where people often associate like brands with each other. So if they're on like a private chain that is using the same core technology as the public chain, if they're ever in a use case where they need a public chain, they'll probably be looking at at something like what they've used before. And in that case, that's like one reason why, if they do use a private chain that's built on the same technology, that's a good thing. And also, for all of these corporations and big players who are not yet ready to use the public chain, and whether that's because of the technology or because in terms of like a risk factor, they're not yet ready to do that. The fact that we see these enterprises who are coming in and starting baking, that's going to be a good sign to them, because if they're looking for a network, are they going to look for a network where the nodes are run by these like random people who know how to do scripts or something, or are they going to actually like seek out the networks where they see large enterprises with lots on the line? Their brand is on the line, their customers are on the line. Are they going to use the network where those kinds of players are actually doing the baking? I think so. We don't see a lot of networks where these really large enterprises are coming in order to produce blocks. That's just not something that we see across a lot of different networks. So the fact that we do see that on Tezos is extremely bullish to me, because not only does it make other companies of the same size or magnitude like feel safer, it also elevates the entire brand of this chain into something that can be like safely deployed in the real world, just because there's like the more trust, the more money that you put on the line, the safer it seems, I think.
Yeah, I have one Tezos example for the first point that you made.
Yeah.
We were working with this team that was completely new to blockchains on the enterprise side, and at first they were really befuddled, right? They were like, "Oh, they were given orders from above. They have to work with this. They don't understand it." So we came in to help them out, and they were using the Quorum chain, which is sort of like private Ethereum. And at first it was very testy, and they were trying to sort of get a hang of what they're using. They were very skeptical. Then they got an off-the-shelf ERC20 token, blah blah blah. Then they started getting a little bit interested, right? Then they got a little bit comfortable. Then they realized that there's this whole thing called Ethereum out there. Next thing I know, like they're asking questions about Compound and blah blah blah. Then I see that they're on Twitter. They're following me, and then I see their timeline. They're retweeting stuff about like Ethereum stuff, and we met them for another project like months down the line, and suddenly they're complete converts, right? I'm not saying this happens all the time, but this goes exactly to your point. Even if someone's using a private deployment, semi-public deployment, whatever, that brand is something that's really interesting. And you know what? This stuff is really, really interesting. Like the governance and the protocol upgrades, the digital commons. A lot of people just like, a lot of people have really boring enterprise jobs. And when they touch something that's interesting, they get really into it.
Yeah.
And then, this upgrade process is really fascinating. And I can totally see a lot of people. The other thing I felt was I saw these people that are, mid-tier or day-to-day employees that are taking to blockchains through private chains, and it probably scales up, right? At some point, the CEO is like, "What is this blockchain thing?" And then they start reading about like some exchange or the other, some coin, and then they start really getting into it.
Yeah,
I think that's how like a lot of these institutional companies are coming in, right? Like the CEO gets enamored, and now the whole company's moving into this.
Pump their stock price.
Right. No, that's really, really funny that you say that, because just the other day I was reading like this Twitter thread from someone from JP Morgan, I think, or something. And he was saying how back in 2017 or 2018, the people who were getting into blockchain, just like buying stuff on the side, were like people in marketing or people in sales or something like that. And now this year, apparently like the people who are talking more about blockchain, because maybe the marketing people are salty now because their bags got dumped or something. I don't know. But apparently this year, the people who are talking more about blockchain are the people who like are in charge of funds, are in charge of like lots of capital. So that's really interesting to me. Yeah.
In 2017, I was at JP Morgan for many years, sadly. And I was like, okay, now I have to work on blockchain. So there were two options. One was to kind of, JP Morgan had already started doing blockchain stuff. So that was one option. The other one was to kind of venture out and do the startup route. And at that time, it didn't feel, to me, other people I think saw enterprise potential, but to me, it didn't feel in-house there was going to be a lot of momentum, right? But when I was at JP Morgan, I mean, because I was an early adopter, I would get an inquiry from here or there, right? Every once in a while, someone like takes me aside, like, "Oh, so what is this Bitcoin thing? Can you explain how it works?" But there wasn't really like that much interest. People were still really skeptical. But even in 2017, but this year, the markets are really red hot right now. I'm getting texts from all these people I haven't really heard from
Yeah.
Like 2 years, and they're all over the place, right? There's people who are in like really senior positions on the front office side. There are people who are doing like really mundane jobs in, like middle office or whatever. So there are all these people. They're like, I wonder what's going on. What is this thing? And they remember Vishakh, and they're like, I wonder what Vishakh can tell us about this. And I've just started ignoring people because I'm like, I'm not doing this stupid blockchain 101 talk for the next time, right? Like go watch CNBC or whatever. So, but you won't believe the amount of interest there is. I'm getting all these texts from people that I never thought would even look at a blockchain.
Yeah, I actually got a few texts myself, and there was one guy who was like, I'll send you like $5,000 right now. Can you buy me Bitcoin? I'm like, no, because I don't know how that would work, like in terms of taxes. Like if I send you the Bitcoin and you send me 5,000, is that actually a trade, or am I doing it as like a gift? So there's all of those questions, but it's like, no, it's like, go sign up for a Coinbase account or something and do it yourself.
Like in the space of people who were blockchain aware, I was like the Tezos guy, right? Like I was like the one guy.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about Ethereum or like whatever. I don't know, name a random VC coin or whatever. So I was always the Tezos guy, and now I see people are independently sending me links. Like, oh, here you should have a look at like ETH just launched, and I'm like, well, we helped launch it. You don't have to tell me about it, right? We wrote the code, but that's something new that did not happen. People did not find like Tezos article from Decrypt and then send it to me saying, oh, you should look at this. Like, don't you do like some of this Tezos stuff? You should have a look. Well, yes, I'm aware of it.
I also think it's interesting that like traditionally before like bull cycles really kick off, there's a phase where you have these early adopters. And I feel like back a few years ago, the people who were early adopters, I guess, were people like us. And this time around, like, and by people like us, I don't actually know what I mean by that, but that's just what happened. You, me, and Will, we were apparently something about us brought us into crypto. So that is what it is. But this time around, it's so interesting where I feel like the people who are reaching out to me are the people who were extremely skeptical about it back in 2017, but they're actually really, really smart. And this time around, 2 or 3 years later, maybe they actually see it more, they might actually be understanding it. And now they're reaching out to me, and these people are like really smart. And they were the same people who were like, oh, you're so dumb for getting into blockchain just a few years ago. But what I haven't seen so far is kind of the euphoria just in the general mainstream yet. So I was in Korea, I think at the end of 2017 or maybe early 2018, and people were legitimately like trading crypto on the train. Like grandma and grandpas just like on BitThumb, just trading crypto. And I've seen none of that this year so far. So it's really interesting to think about like where we are in terms of the hype cycle. It does seem like that the really smart people are actually paying attention now, as opposed to just writing it off a few years ago. So that's really bullish to me.
Well, I think we can probably start talking about developer relations. Brian, would you like to talk about the Delphi upgrade?
Yeah, sure. So this is something I don't believe we've talked to Vishakh about a lot. And it's been one of the biggest things that has happened recently. So the passing of the 007 upgrade, and the biggest changes that it brought was the reduction in gas fees. And that really does open up the chain to a lot more applications that may rely on, a large amount of transactions to take place in a small amount of time, or if you're making a lot of calls to different smart contracts and stuff like that. So the reduction in gas fees definitely helps in that regard. And I also think it's one of those things that are going to help us build the house, as we were saying at the start of this podcast. So Vishakh, did you have any thoughts on the Delphi upgrade and also the upcoming Ado upgrade.
Yeah, absolutely. So for a long time, we wanted to sort of bring this use case to the Tezos blockchain. And a little bit of a self-plug, if you go to my Twitter right now, I have a pinned tweet sort of talking about fantasy sports markets. It's just something that we wanted to build for a long time. And we're just waiting for the right amount of maturity to come in. And Delphi was really important for that because all the off-the-shelf tools are available. This FA2 standard is really powerful, right? It's a really flexible standard that's very modular, can serve a whole variety of use cases from security tokens all the way to the sort of niche stuff that we want to do, more gaming related. You can have multi-asset tokens. You can do all this cool stuff, but the Delphi upgrade made FA2 certain types of token transfers to FA2 a lot cheaper. So Tezos, if you operate on layer 1 of Tezos, it's still not super scale, right? So if you were trying to bring an application that it's a gaming application that potentially like large numbers of people are going to use, then you don't feel super confident that it's going to perform, right? Like the backend, you're probably better off with the database. But that reduction in gas costs, reduction in storage costs makes it a lot more feasible and makes it feasible enough now that we feel comfortable seriously thinking about starting to build this idea. Of course, in the long term, we'll need stuff like layer 2 solutions and stuff that are being worked on right now, fast finality as well. But this is the first really important step to show us that it's actually ripe for building these sort of sophisticated smart contracts that are needed to build anything non-trivial. It's one thing, you just like launch a really illiquid token and you declare success, right? But that's not organic usage of the chain. For organic usage of the chain, you need to build a rich application. For rich application, you need non-trivial smart contracts. And obviously Coz, which is the game being the card game that's being built.
Kathleen Brightman's game.
Yeah, it's not, all the details are not fully out yet, but I imagine even if that game sees a lot of success, they're going to need that kind of sort of de facto scaling that's provided by the Delphi upgrade. And for Edo, we're still taking stock of. It's really cool having the BLS curves and having the really cool stuff from Zerocash, from Zcash over into the Tezos world. So having privacy in general is quite exciting. But to be honest, we still need to evaluate, right? As a company, we haven't actually gone in and we haven't actually written like a couple of small example contracts using the fancy new stuff. But suffice to say, the long-term implications are absolutely enormous, right? Using these tokens which are now possible, the shielded tokens which are now possible, using, I forget what the term is, but
is it the mask?
These modes that you can pass between contracts.
Yeah.
Sorry, what did you call them?
It's MASP, I believe. It's what the acronym was for it.
Something like that, but I just forgot the name. But that stuff, really cool. Lets you move assets around without sort of centrally going through a contract. The implications are absolutely enormous. I suspect it's going to take some time for regular developers, who are not programming languages, PhDs at Nomadic, to get used to this new capability, to start writing code that actually leverages it. The first step, so obviously in Michelson, we have these new instructions that let you use these new capabilities, but it sort of has to be backported into SmartPy and Lego. Maybe it's already done, I'm not aware, but people like us have to kind of clear the plate a little bit, go to SmartPy, Lego, whatever people like, just play around a little bit, write a few example contracts. But it's absolutely amazing, right? Like this is not yet, this is another thing in which There's a capability that we have on Tezos right now, which doesn't exist on Ethereum and clearly not Bitcoin.
Right.
And then the last time we talked, it was all part of this big 007 package. There were also going to be baking keys and stuff like that. That's still on the agenda for the next protocol upgrade. So that's really exciting. That's even beyond Edo. And then one last thing is in Edo, a new governance period has been added. And I think it's really, really great that that's been done, because as tool makers, it's always been a little bit nerve-wracking going through a protocol upgrade, because literally, the network changes itself, changes its behavior within 1 minute, right? Between like block X and block X plus 1,
right?
Like everything's different, right? So these days there's a lot of regularity, there's a lot of coordination between the tool builders, the protocol builders, the sort of even more business-oriented people like TQ. But it's not a given that future protocol upgrades are not going to be contentious, or there's not going to be some uncertainty attached to them, especially as more regulations and stuff start coming in. So this additional sort of cool down governance period is going to be an absolute lifesaver. Like I'm really glad it has happened.
Yeah, and I actually think, just the addition of that, a lot of people don't realize it, but it's kind of a big deal for proof of stake in general. I would argue, because this is the first time a decentralized and permissionless proof of stake blockchain has attempted to essentially amend the way it amends itself.
I'll tell you, I told you guys this last time, and I'll tell you every single time. Every time I see a protocol upgrade happen in front of my eyes, I worked a lot with distributed systems and stuff. Like back when I was, when I worked at JP Morgan or Bear Stearns or whatever, we dealt with a lot of complexity, right? And it takes a lot of intelligence and effort to get a lot of financial applications running. But it was never like this, right? It was never on a global scale.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a corporation where everybody reports to the CEO and you mess up, then the CEO is going to come down and yell at you, and then you start like shaking in your boots. No. It's like a bunch of random people all over the world, right? The foundation has a few bakers, but not that many. They don't really control the network. And yet, every single time, when the adoption happens, you sit there and right in front of your eyes, the whole upgrade of this global distributed system happens in front of your eyes. And I wish there's still a lot of skepticism about blockchains, and I think that's healthy. It's good to be skeptical about new technology. But there's places like Hacker News and stuff where people are still like really like, oh, this blockchain stuff, not another show. There's a lot of people that work on distributed systems. They do like really, really cool stuff. I just want them to see with their own eyes, forget about what you think about cryptocurrency or decentralization or whatever. This is a technological feat. Just observe with your own eyes, like this absolute marvel happening. I personally can never get over it. Like I was skeptical. Honestly, I was skeptical. When the first protocol upgrade was happening, I was like, okay, now the rubber hits the road. I wasn't sure it was gonna play through, right? I was like, you know what? If this doesn't work, whatever, pack our bags. I go back, crawling back to JP Morgan, begging them for my job back. But yeah, like all these people that are doing really impressive feats of engineering, I just wish just this little bit, they could just have a look and just kind of see it for this really admirable thing that now is going to happen every 3 months. It's going to become like completely blasé, right? We don't even think about it. Which boggles my mind.
Yeah, it's just like the change of state from one block to the next. It kind of reminds me like the way that you were talking about it, how I felt when I saw my baby for the first time. Just 1 minute before that, it was he was alive, of course, but like not outside in the real world, right? And then the next minute, he's out here, and everything changed.
Like you don't have to start parenting, but you get like the cute baby from a distance, and then once you get used to it, then you start changing the diapers.
Yeah, like my bank account is still safe. Next minute,
it's the same thing. Childcare, blockchains, exactly the same.
Strikingly similar, actually. Lots of babysitting in the blockchain space.
Lots of drama.
Yeah, lots of drama.
launching Galleon like in 2018. It was crazy, right? The stress, the uncertainty, and the craziness.
Yeah.
Mine was having a baby at the same time, right? And then finally, like Galleon came out, and we were all relieved. But then, like, you got 1 minute to celebrate, and then you're like, "Oh my God, gotta keep it alive, gotta keep it alive."
Yeah.
On a really small scale, on a really like insignificant, trivial scale, we were pretty much doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Ben was doing with his baby, right? Like, oh, wonderful! Like, look at this cute baby. Pictures sent to everybody, but now they're like, "Oh my God, we have to keep this thing alive, and it's trying to like essentially kill itself."
How do I hold it?
Yeah.
Will, do you want to hit us up with some closing thoughts?
Yeah, so I guess before we start to wrap everything up, for a final thought, are there any sort of things that we maybe noticed this year that we would like to see improved within the ecosystem? And, just some final closing thoughts we have about everything we witnessed within 2020.
Yeah, so one improvement that I'd like to see is, so far, there's been some really good work done, but we're still transplanting stuff that's worked on Ethereum onto Tezos. And my hope for 2021 is there's some really novel applications that come to Tezos, something that's unlike anything that's happening on Ethereum or what have you. We're going to try to make our own small contribution to that. We're bringing this sort of idea, or trying to bring this idea on there. You can check out my Twitter again, a little bit of self-shilling. And then with Tezos Stable Tech, there's also some rather interesting plans to build a really intricate governance structure around a full suite of financial products. So I'm really excited about that for 2021 as well. But this thing that we talked about, with these new capabilities that are coming in with Edo, there's some really smart people already in the Tezos ecosystem, and I'm really looking forward to see what they do with it. All the hard work has been done. These protocol upgrades have happened. All these tooling has been built. There are live, resilient applications that are running, so there's no doubt that we can have good, rich applications working on Tezos. So now it's just time to shut up and build. And just really, like, in 1 year, when you guys do your next retrospective, I think that's going to be a bumper episode.
Yeah, I also have a few thoughts as well for 2021. So, like I was saying, in 2020, it was really about getting to a place where the technology is more accessible to everyone from a tools perspective. So now I think we're in a pretty good place, and things are only going to get better. So one thing that I want to see is more people in the community start experimenting with the technology. And, because now we have all these like SDKs, we have all these like documentation stuff that you can just read through step by step and get started. So, everything seems impossible, but before you actually start to do it. So, when people think about code, they just like, oh my God, this is so complex, blah, blah, blah. But like when you get deep down to it, it's really just like if-then statements, it's thinking about how to solve a problem and knowing the syntax to write the code to solve that problem. So now that we have all these tools, there's much less hacking around, which before I would say was, and not just in blockchain, like in any open source kind of thing, if you have to hack around a lot, that can kind of be a buzzkill of sorts. So now that we have all these tools in place, I think it's a really good time for people to start to get involved. And like once you start to experiment and build things and actually understand what you can do, maybe you'll have a big idea, and maybe that idea will turn into nothing. Maybe it'll turn into a business. Maybe it'll turn into the next Coinbase. Who really knows? So I would recommend everyone in the community to get themselves involved somehow from that respect.
Yeah, and I think it's nice to see the focus placed this year on having, these more frequent protocol upgrades. DeFi is also beginning to have more primitives laid out, for higher level applications. And, we obviously have several launches. I think Vishakh brought up Emergence, which is the name of the game. That should be coming out hopefully next year. But like Brian said, kind of, if we could leave any message, it's really to build or, start actually, trying some of these things out. Use Dexter Exchange, use Kakai Wallet, use Magma Wallet, actually test some of these things out.
Yeah, and if you can't code, just like use it and give feedback, because the user experience is even arguably like more important than the actual code. If someone builds a product that's like really technically proficient, but it's just terrible from like a perspective of how people actually interact with it, then maybe that product actually doesn't have that much, I guess, value in the long term. So even if you see yourself as someone who's not technical, but like we all use smartphones, we all use apps. Like when you use a good app or a bad app. So if you feel like something is bad or something can need improvement, then that can be a really good way to, reach out to the devs and talk to them about it. I think everyone in the community is very open to feedback. So that's also something you can do.
1000% at Cryptonomic, we're desperate for user feedback. I don't know if you guys saw, but now we're downright bribing people, right? We had a user test on Twitter that we're $25 a pop. Please show up for a user test.
I think I saw that on
absolutely
Twitter.
Desperate. Yeah. Any feedback the community has, we value it and we act on it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this final episode of the year. We really appreciate talking to you all the time. And I'm sure we'll have you back next year for one or more episodes, I'm sure.
So, yeah, don't stretch, we're almost there. We just have to stay safe. So you guys stay safe as well. And as soon as social distancing is over, looking forward to doing the next episode, maybe in person, right? Maybe the next one.
Yeah. You should come. Will should come. We can do a TezTalks Tokyo one-time special.
Yeah, maybe we can get a Joe Rogan office space.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us again. Thanks for listening to this episode of TezTalks Radio, and have a happy new year.